I believe you all met Pradeep yesterday. So Pradeep, welcome back, our Chancellor from UCSD.
Thank you.
Thank you for your hospitality here today. And I wanted to suggest that we all give a hand to Mark and Barrett and Evan and Sally, all the staff for this great event that they've organized. It's really been terrific. Okay, so we're going to talk about leadership in the university. And so, Pradeep, I'd like to start off with thinking about pivots. So there are those points in a role where a leader has to pivot. And unfortunately, we're at one of those times. I believe academic leadership is in a very disadvantageous position. You're facing funding cuts, required changes to policies, losses of international students. And so I'd like to start off and ask, how can university leaders pivot with those multifaceted challenges and ensure continued success?
That's actually a good question. So good morning, everybody. Seems like I'm your wake-up call. Like I just show up at the first session to kind of wake you up. But anyways, that's a great question. So so I think as a university leader, it is pretty unique position as compared to leadership of companies and other places. You are pivoting all the time. And it becomes problematic if you pivot too much or if you pivot with the direction of the wind, as we just saw with the presidency of Michigan and then University of Florida, it can backfire very badly. So the most important thing to remember, you have to change direction, you have to pivot, but you still got to have your North Star. You got to understand what are the principles you base your leadership on, what does the institution stand for, and how are you going to thread the needle while being true to your principles, right? So let's just take where we are today. Where we are today, nobody likes it. We have no choice. No, seriously, nobody likes it. Even the red states don't like it. Because if NIH gets cut, Florida gets cut too. So you cannot say we're going to cut NIH, but Florida will keep on getting funding, right? So even the red states don't like it. And academics that take pride in being competitive and writing proposals that are peer-reviewed and mass the scrutiny of multiple peers from all over the country don't want to be at a place where they're funded and there's no peer review of their scientific work, there's no real appreciation of what they do. Now, in spite of all of that, we are faced with significant funding cuts. Number one thing for a leader is to, first of all, acknowledge. I can tell you, even on this campus, when I've told people what the cuts are going to be and how we are preparing, there are people who think life is going to be fine and this is just a bad day. The Chancellor's having a bad dream and he's going to wake up next morning and maybe he'll have a better dream and life would be good. But the first thing is to accept where we are. And that's the beginning of the pivot point, right? And right now, everybody's doing the same thing. So I think the mistake everybody's making, which kind of is not really a mistake, but kind of a mistake, is they're insisting on replacing the funding. The feds pay $60 billion a year to the universities in federal funding. There is no way you can replace $60 billion a year after year after year using private money, okay? So we just need to wake up. So we need to, first of all, reduce our appetite. We need to understand we will have to keep on pursuing research, but with less resources. That means we'll be selective about problems we look at. We'll be selective about how many postdocs we have, about how many grad students we have. You see what I'm saying? So that pivot to me is not just me pivoting, it's me organizing my thoughts and convincing my colleagues, and leaders like Larry and Ramesh and everybody else, and getting them to organize their faculty to make sure that they are also organizing their thoughts and orienting in the right direction. So that's the pivot I'm talking about. It's not just going to industry, going to pharma and saying, give me more money.
Well, so instability and uncertainty are, terrible for the business world. It's also really bad for the academic world. Students don't like uncertainty about whether they can go back home to their country and get back to their campus, whether they can continue a program, whether they could continue studying under their PhD mentor. And so now we have barbarians at the gate. You've got the EU.
Yep.
So my soundbite is always, we innovate, the EU regulates. And so they're keenly aware of the gaps between innovation in America and the EU. So they've developed a very aggressive program to mature their digital workforce, to teach them about technologies and how to use them. Now, we don't do that. We just invent the stuff and throw it out there in the market and let people use it. But as a result of that, we have engineers inventing things that don't meet compliance requirements with laws. We have business graduates who are setting up operating models that violate laws or run into all sorts of problems because of their lack of knowledge of the whole global framework. So the EU is in a position, I think, where they could try to seize market share and promote innovation by funding research that would develop products, maybe not the best mousetrap, but they meet the compliance requirements.
Right.
And now they're stepping up and actively already trying to recruit global talent from around the world to come to EU universities, not US universities.
Right.
And so how does a university leader counter the pull of these initiatives?
So multiple things, right? So number one, regardless of the business you're in, whenever there's a dislocation, the party that's competing with you is going to take advantage of the dislocation. And what we're seeing is a significant dislocation in higher education, not because higher education is structurally weak, because of policy issues coming out of Washington, D.C., right? So that's what is causing the dislocation. So if I was EU, I'd be doing exactly what they're doing. Australia, I'd be doing the same thing. China, I'd be doing exactly the same thing. In fact, if you look at the article, today there's an article in APLU, Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, which talks about China offering, how should I say, incentives for you to move to China and live in certain cities because they want to attract more people, Chinese people with PhDs from the US to come back, right? So that is going to happen. So that's not the problem. The problem is, how do we counteract that? In some sense, again, one needs to take a step back and ask, what is the business we are in? If my goal is to support all the 3,000 faculty and safeguard them, then that thought process already is a losing thought process. I will not be able to do that. I mean, there's no way that works because we will lose some of them. So the question for me is, who do we protect and who do we just worry about? No, worry less about. Secondly, to the people that we cannot aggressively protect, we have to do deals. Like Australian president was just here, the University of Australia, New South Wales. And so we are saying, okay, can we have a joint research program where the faculty member doesn't have to leave here, but they will fund part of their research here and we will own the IP jointly. Well, that sounds like a good deal to me. We have the infrastructure, we have the people, we have access to talent, and they don't. So those are the creative ways of doing it, but not every president is in that category of trying to position their universities with the resources they have, right? So some of the EU countries are like more aggressive and they're taking a sledgehammer approach, like come here and just, you'll work for us.
Well, you mentioned China. Tom Friedman recently wrote about the vast gains in China that they've made in the STEM area, that every year they have 3.5 million STEM graduates, and how they've built all this infrastructure across the country loaded with AI, and the collaborations that they've set up between government and industry. So I wonder, what do universities need to do to maintain the STEM leadership in America?
So look, at the end of the day, the universities didn't wake up one day and said, we're going to be the STEM leaders. It was the federal government that created the Great American Research University that allowed us to think in terms of American exceptionalism for the universities sector, right? So, in some sense, it cannot now become the university's problem to maintain that leadership because we don't have the resources. I mean, some places do. We have large endowments. But even there, I mean, just pick a university with the largest endowment or the second largest endowment or third largest, and what you will find out is the money is already predestined. It's already allocated to Larry's research, to Ramesh's research. So if I come in and say, wait a second, cut it half and give it to Jody, it's not going to be liked. I'll go to the state attorney general. So I think in some sense, it is not, it is the university's problem in the sense that I don't want to lose a competitive edge in terms of our rankings and our impact, but it is not my problem to save the world when the US taxpayer has walked away, in this case, not you all, but the person representing you in DC basically has said, we're walking away from supporting you, right? So that is the fundamental issue. And I think what you will see is the threats, the bark is way worse than the bite because the bark is really big right now. At the end, NIH is not going to be cut 50%. I mean, it'll be a disaster. It'll be cut maybe 20%, and that we can manage. So I am still like optimistic. I don't think I'm having a bad dream. Don't get me wrong, okay? This is not a bad dream. I know this is a bad reality, okay? But I still see a little bit of light at the end of this tunnel because pragmatism has to reign at some point. The country has made several stupid moves and mistakes, but in the end, the country always does the right thing. So there's a reason why, after a couple of hundred years, we are still dominating in technology and science and in many other, and in the economy, right? So.
Yeah, well, that's
We disagree.
that's a very optimistic picture, but
Well, we'll see.
but I don't think Harvard's feeling that today. And
Actually, no. Just another article on Harvard where there's one face for the public and there's little implementation in the background to basically appease the government. At the end of the day, nobody wins in the short term by fighting the government. Battling a government is always a very long-term battle with large swaths of people who have to all buy in. And right now, I can tell you, half the country sees no use for research. That's why we are doing the government is doing what it's doing, because the other half of the country doesn't understand, and some of us, like maybe 10% of the top, really know what research is. So if you ask me, for example, what research has impacted, let's take 3M. 3M is a very large materials/chemical company. I can point to multiple people who've been trained at Harvard, MIT, Stanford, San Diego, Berkeley, who have gone and built great technologies and done great work out there. But if you tell me exactly every taxpayer dollar that has impacted 3M, it's very hard for me to say what that is. I can give you some examples, but not the multi-billion-dollar company that is. So I think we produce both science, technologies, and people. And at the end of the day, the biggest leverage is the people. Without the people, nothing works.
But it doesn't work without money either. And so
Right.
let's just take that parade of horribles. And what did you say yesterday? I think you have 1.8 billion in research. So how much of that's federal money?
More than $1 billion.
More than $1 billion.
Right.
And so if that got cut, what are you going to do?
I'll have to rethink my life. And
Yeah.
No, actually, it is indeed true. And this is what I'm talking about, a pivot, where we have to ask ourselves, if for some reason the research, the money that was coming here, and I expanded the institution on what I call leverage. So it's like you're in the stock market. You borrow money on margin to trade, and God forbid the calls go the other way, and now there's a margin call. At the end of the day, you have to pay the Pied Piper. I mean, you cannot just walk away and say, I'm not paying you. So in this case, so the biggest impact, so in our $1.8 billion portfolio, 400 million is indirect costs, okay? 400, which is a big number. So when the direct money goes away, all the research would evaporate, so people will have no postdocs, there'll be no graduate students, faculty will teach a little bit more. So that is 1.4 billion, that'll be taken care of. The 400 million that's indirect cost, that's supporting the infrastructure, that's factored into my payment plan, my mortgages, my employment of janitors. So that's the one which is the biggest risk I'm taking. So out of that, about 200 million is in mortgages. So that's the largest risk. I cannot just walk away from a 30-year mortgage. I have to pay that off, right? So in some sense, the leverage looks high, but on the other hand, if you think very analytically, it is a manageable situation, but a really, really bad situation that no faculty member wants to deal with, no chancellor wants to be in, no dean wants to deal with it, right? So, but that's where we are.
So we have a great amount of wealth in this country.
Yep.
That came from technology.
Mm-hmm.
And if the government funding goes away, universities are going to have to look somewhere for funding.
Yep.
Now, I know from my own community that the foundations are being hit very hard by all their social services and the other programs that they fund in the communities. So when the universities come pounding on the door too, they've already had people at their door because those were some of the first cuts. And so where do you go? If you lose this money, where do you go?
So clearly you go to individual philanthropists. But again, remember, $60 billion is the US investment in universities as on a yearly basis for research, okay? Generating that money out of private philanthropy, foundations, companies is nearly impossible. I mean, I don't know, I cannot emphasize this enough. So we will first have to shrink our appetite. We'll have to think about what are we going to eat and how are we going to, we'll have to really shrink our appetite very considerably. Secondly, we will have to, how should I say, organize this community out here, which is a community of intellectuals, leaders, power players, connectors, to basically start making the case to your local congressmen, to your local senators, that I don't have access to, but you all do, coming from all over the country, to make the case. Higher education is a $700 billion a year industry. If you trash this industry down to, let's say, bring it down to 350 or 400 billion, there's a lot of job losses that are going to happen, a lot of competitive edge that's going to be lost. Fewer students are going to be trained and graduated. So the impact on the country is very, very significant. People see the indirect costs and say, oh yeah, you guys are wasting money. They don't see the big picture of higher ed in the US economy.
So if the universities lost a lot of funding for 1 year,
It would be okay.
it would be okay.
Right.
What about 2 years?
We will deal.
You would deal with
Yeah.
it. But
3
after
years.
that,
3 years, we might manage. 4 years, we'd be in trouble.
would that be across the country?
Um,
I mean, would there be some universities that couldn't make it?
Okay, so it would depend on the leverage, right? So I can tell you, UC San Diego, if we were to lose, I don't know, 200, 250 a year, given how big we are and the part of the system we are in, 2-3 years, we'll lose $500 million, $750 million. We will come at the other end, reformatted, rethinking what our priorities are. But we are not going to be out of existence. That I can guarantee you, right? Because at the end of the day, education is still the largest part of our business. Healthcare is the other part of our business. So out of our $10 billion top line, research is only about 1.8, of which 1.4 is direct cost. If it goes away, it just goes away. 400 is indirect, that I deal with. And the rest is teaching. So we'll just have to reformat our thinking and say, you know what? Maybe we're going to teach a little bit more. Maybe we're going to teach a little bit differently. Maybe there's going to be student-faculty ratios are going to change a little bit. But at the end of the day, we'll have to make do without research. So the universities in the country have basically defined research to be a prestige issue. But I've always argued that a great research university is not a great university. We need to be a great university before we are a great research university, which means great teaching and great research, right? And I think, so whatever we do, we will end up shrinking it. Remember, 4,000 universities in the country, more than 3,500, maybe more, don't do research, okay? They're small undergrad colleges and technical institutions of like 2,000 students, 500 students. They'll be fine.
So Bill Gates has announced he's closing his foundation.
Yeah, I thought of calling him.
Yeah. And so I think about him and all of the great work he's done in developing countries. But is it time for our tech titans to step up and that top half of 1% to?
Right. I think you're right. I think the tech titans, if they were to pool their resources, they can easily pony up like $20 billion a year of research funding for the next 5 years, or 30 billion, like 50% of the government funds, and that will tide us through a bad 5-year period. And that would be chump change. I mean, 30 billion times 5 years is 150 billion. Just one person that I can think of can do it without making a dent in his portfolio, right? And he's the one after government efficiencies, but anyways.
But if these cuts were sustained through an entire Trump administration, the impact of that wouldn't be immediately recoverable, would it?
No, it'll be terrible. So like, let's say 50% cut in NIH, that would take us back to, if I'm approximately correct, maybe like 2004 type of time frame when the money was that level of money. And at that point, you ask yourself what the university size was, and that would be a stark reality, where instead of 40,000 staff, I had like 20,000 staff members. You know what I'm saying?
So it could set us back 10 years?
20, at least.
20 years.
20 years, no doubt about it. But 2 years of funding cut, I think, would put China in the lead squarely. I was just in China, and people think of China as AI. You should look at their biotech industry. It is unbelievable what they're doing. If they are the ones who are going to create high-priced pharma and drugs and sell it here, guess what? Our insurance companies will pay them instead of paying us. So it's gonna happen. I mean, they are at the cutting edge. They really are.
What have you done about advocacy work at UCSD, and what are some of the examples of the advocacy work you've done?
So, like, you may not believe this, but just sitting here and talking, in my mind, is a little bit of advocacy, because not everybody's going to go call your senator or congressman, but I guarantee you, some of you will, or run into them, or run in circles where they are around, and you will talk about this conversation. I'm on the Hill like literally every other week. My Vice Chancellor of Research is there when I'm not there. My other Vice Chancellor of Health Sciences, he's there so between the 3 or 4 of us, somebody is in Washington, D.C. like literally every day. Between the CEO of Health, Vice Chancellor of Health, Vice Chancellor of Research, me, and Marine Sciences. So somebody is on the Hill every day talking to just about everybody. And what we find is, even on a good day, a congressman or a senator will not talk to you if you're not part of their constituency. And now it has become worse. So being from California, they see us as a blue state, which we kind of are, but I tell people there's a lot of middle America in California. You go to middle of California, it's the good old middle America. So there's a lot of red out there, and we cannot just poo-poo what those people are thinking and think we are the only ones who are intellectuals who know the right answer. We are not. I mean, at the end, this is a democracy. Everybody has an answer, and the average of everybody's answer is the answer of the government, and that's what we are seeing right now.
If you have questions, you can come to the
Yeah.
mics. I would
right.
like to have some discussion on this topic. One last question
I
is
hope there's
about
no press out
promoting
here.
collaboration between...
Too late to ask, but I said I hope there's no press here, but it's too late to ask.
We'll try to Chatham House rules. Public-private, pardon? Not on
That's-
Chatham House rules. So public-private collaboration. Europe has a program they call industrial PhD.
Yep.
And a woman I know from Spotify went to University of Oklahoma, and they agreed she could do her PhD there. And Spotify would pay for her schooling and pay her salary. And then she collaborated with Spotify and her PhD mentor on the research she would do, so it would be beneficial to her and the university, but also to Spotify.
Yep.
And so she got that program. She said that Europe has these all over the place, but the United States doesn't.
Right, because we have a puritanical view of research. where just like separation of church and state, we think there should be a separation of research and industry that is guiding the research, which kind of works when you have a lot of government money and you have the freedom to make that statement. But given where we are right now, if industry is going to pay the bills, we'll have to rethink our policy of IP. Maybe buy dole, the way it is written, doesn't work anymore. If industry is paying me directly, I have to rethink all of that. As we speak, my innovation person is on his way to Singapore because we just got a large center funded by Singapore government, and they want to own IP jointly. Now, typically, we would not do that. I mean, NIH gives me money. There's no joint ownership between U.S. government and us. But this is Singapore, and now we have an open mind. We may not have had this open mind like a year ago, but we are open-minded today. So,
Go ahead.
Let me just ask, are there any media here? Yeah, thank you. Okay.
is that yes or no?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, Chancellor, you talked about advocacy, and I applaud you and your leadership team for what you described in your work on Capitol Hill. What can you tell us about the way institutions are collaborating to make the case together?
So there are multiple organizations in the country that represent institutions. Let me just pull out two of them. AAU, which is Association of American Universities. There's 62 of us, 60 from the US, actually a couple more, but 62 is the number. 30 public, 30 private. These are the top public and top private institutions. So AAU has taken the mantle of like really forcing the issue vis-a-vis speaking for these universities, whether it is public or private or combination. What we find is when, and you can go, this is public record, you can go look at the cases that have been filed. So they have taken the route of courts, like filing court cases and getting injunctions and restraining orders, right? So that is working temporarily, but I don't see that as a permanent solution because everything that is being done, if time was not your enemy, you could do all of that in a period of next 18 months by just running it through Congress, passing the budget bill. You know what I'm saying? So they are fighting back. APLU is fighting back. But I think what we have to do is we have to take a step back and ask ourselves, can we as universities do some things slightly differently? Can we be a little bit more efficient? Can we be a little bit less bureaucratic? Can we be a little bit more inclusive? Can we be not so self-righteous that we are the only ones who know the right answer? I mean, can we be, you see what I'm saying? And that to me is a pivot. And that pivot has not happened broadly defined.
Thank you. This is really interesting. You mentioned a couple of times that essentially we have the government that represents, the government in some senses represents the people, and half of the people, as you said, don't see the value in research. And so I'm asking what I think is similar to what Pete was asking, which is there seems to be a need for universities as a group to do much better outreach with the public. I'm not talking about law cases or lobbying on the Hill. I mean with ordinary people to explain what universities do and why it's important.
No, that's indeed true.
And I'm wondering, is there more of a concerted effort now that the rubber has met the road?
So yes, we do. Again, AAU has taken charge of that, and APLU does. So if you look at, AAU does a survey every year. The confidence in the universities is going down in the country, okay? Having said that, the confidence or the belief that a higher education degree leads to a better lifestyle or a better quality of life is constant or going up. So, see, there's a little dichotomy here where on one hand you believe in education, but you don't believe in universities. You believe in the dominance of the economy being fueled by science and technology, but you don't believe in research. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's actually an interesting phenomenon that's going on, and I think we need to do a better job. So, for example, we at UC San Diego, a very large campaign, you can go to our website and look at it. It's called Behind Every Breakthrough. It is speaking in simple English. like what work am I doing that is going to change your lifestyle, that is going to make your family healthier, that is going to add like 5 years to your parents' life or your grandparents' life. I can just go down. So those are the issues we have to deal with. And it is happening. It's been happening every year, but it's happening in more earnest now, and speaking in simpler English rather than complicated verbiage that only you and I understand, but the person in the fields has no clue.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. But
I think that was press, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Is it real fast?
Sure. Mark Mahan, we need a film on this is my comment, but my question is whether or not you're going to reach out to industry like pharma itself needs some of this research, and can you partner? And there used to be the IBMs, the ATTs, and so on.
Yeah, so I think the short answer is yes. I mean, we have a large portfolio. So the way pharma does research is not necessarily paying us to discover the next molecule. They wait for us to figure that out from NIH money. Their research is focused more on clinical trials. So if there is a molecule, the question is, what target can it address? And there'll be a clinical trial, and we would run like large-scale clinical trials. And that's where, so people don't see that. Most normal people don't see clinical trials as research, but that really is the research in healthcare that translates the basic ideas through clinical trials into cures and therapies, right? So we do a lot of that, and that's where pharma focuses on. And we are a big part of running clinical trials.
Pradeep, thank you so much.
This is great.
And
Thank you.
Thank you again for the hospitality here.